Hello, my dear friends. Justyn Smith here, and welcome back to another broadcast. Today we are looking at Psalm 127, We Need the Lord. It's a blessing to have you with us again, and I trust and pray that our desire today would be to lift this prayer and to understand where each of us need the Lord to minister in our lives, and especially in our families. Psalm 127. Notice our very first point, we need the Lord because we can be busy living without Him. This is an obvious trait of anybody in 2024, even as a church goer. We can go to church, we can have our set aside time where we sing to God and hear from His Word, worshiping Him, but we can literally be so busy that it is a checking the box mentality. We are literally living without Him. Notice the admonition. Notice the encouragement. Except the Lord build the house, they labor in vain that build it. Except the Lord keep the city, the watchman waketh but in vain. As we consider the next verse, we read that it is vain, it's empty, it can be selfish for you to rise up early and to sit up late to eat the bread of sorrows. For so he giveth his beloved sleep. Let's look at those two verses in depth, reminding ourselves of the first point again. We need the Lord because we can be so busy living without Him. We need the Lord. There is this exception, okay, to each of our houses and to the great house spiritually as we make application. The Lord needs to build it. When we consider our own homes, it is vain for us to rise up early, to sit up late, if the Lord doesn't build the house. Now, I believe we ought to be busy. I really do believe we ought to be busy. I believe we ought to be focused. I believe we ought to be dedicated. We ought to do our part. But are we seeking the Lord? Are we desiring the Lord to build these houses? Are we desiring the Lord to establish His church? For He has, but is our focus what we can do, or is our focus what He has already done and what He is doing? We need the Lord to build the house. We don't want our labors to be in vain. We don't want all the effort that we put into the work to be nothing. Likewise for the city. And when you think of the great city, Jerusalem, the beloved city of God, the Lord needed to keep it for it to be the city that the Lord was present in. Because it didn't matter what watchmen you had around the city. It didn't matter what security guards were there. If you did not have the Lord keeping or protecting the city, everything that the watchman was doing was in vain. If the Lord's not keeping or watching over your family, everything that mom and dad is doing is vanity of vanity, saith the preacher. That leads us to point number 2 today. We need the Lord because the fruit of the womb is His heritage and reward. So as we think about the great responsibility that we have to seek the Lord on behalf of our homes and behalf of our city, we recognize where our children come from. Lo, or behold, I'm getting your attention. Children are an heritage of the Lord. The Lord is passing them to us. The Lord is allowing us the blessing of children. The fruit of the womb is His reward. You see, children are a gift from God. Children are precious lives to be cared for, as considered a great reward, fruit from the womb, this which God has blessed and given and allowed. It is an heritage, and we rejoice in the Lord. Therefore we say, we need the Lord to build. We need the Lord to establish our homes. We need to trust in Him. Number 3. We need the Lord because we need help raising children. It is very obvious that without the Lord, our raising of children is not going to be what it could be. I don't know if you've come to this grip of reality yet, but you come to the end of yourself and say, I can't, but with God, I can. It takes responsibility. It takes determination. It takes rising up again today and teaching the same thing you taught yesterday. Repetition, the mother of all learning. And you teach your child the same truth, and you wonder if your child has gotten it. We need the Lord because we need His help in raising our children for His glory. As it says in verse 4, as arrows are in the hand of a mighty man, so are children of the youth. Verse 4 speaks to great dedication. Verse 4 speaks to great long-term perspective. Okay, just like a mighty man who molds and makes his arrows. He molds them and makes them to fly straight. And though a man or a lady cannot exactly choose the child that's given to them, like a mighty man begins by choosing his stick, when that stick is chosen, he begins to create that shaft, that arrowhead, the feathers that are to be attached, that he begins to mold and to make an arrow into that which can fly straight, ultimately accomplishing what it is the design of the arrow to do. Maybe that arrow's design is to protect. Maybe that arrow's design is to provide. And I trust that you understand what I mean by those two things. To protect a city with an arrow is the idea of warfare. To provide for a family in the future is the idea of taking in the hunt. To understand that to protect and to provide takes practice. After the mighty man has trimmed off the knots or the edges that are sticking out, he's honing that arrow to the point of it flying straight. There's little times of launching out that eventually will come back to the hand of the mighty man and then launch out for good to the accomplishing of the purpose of which it is created for. We need the help of the Lord in raising children. This leads us to a fourth thought today. We need the Lord because He can bring satisfying results in raising a godly, influential family. Notice what it says in verse 5. Happy is the man that hath his quiver full of them. Arrows in the hand of a mighty man, children that are an heritage of the Lord, the fruit of His womb. They shall not be ashamed, but they shall speak with the enemies in the gate. And now we could talk to both sides of those who could be ashamed. We could talk to the shame of parents in not raising children for the glory of God. And we could also talk to the shame of the children who are not living for the glory of God. But when a man and a woman decide we are going to seek the Lord for the establishment and the building of our home, the keeping of our city, we will then be investing in our happiness. We are not going to be ashamed because our children are not going to be ashamed. They are even going to rise to a position of speaking with the enemies in the gates. The gates in the Bible, the gates in ancient times, refer to a place or a position where politics within the city would be talked about, where decisions would be made. need, not just within the city, but also obviously without the city. The meeting of the minds that would come together from two separate entities that were either waging war against each other or the possibility of conflict that would arise. We need the Lord. Now, let me recap these points before we close in the message. We need the Lord. We need the Lord because we can be busy living without Him. We need the Lord because the fruit of the womb is His heritage and reward, and we want to raise these children for the glory of God. So we need the Lord's help in raising children. Then we need the Lord because He can bring satisfying results in raising a godly, influential family. So this brings us ultimately to state we need the Lord. It takes humility to say this. We need the Lord because oftentimes we think that we can take care of it. We think that we can handle it. We think that we've got this. But the reality is, without Him, we can do nothing. Likewise, in salvation, we can't save ourselves. We can't establish the family of God. We can't keep the city of the Lord, but we trust Him. He is the one who can. He is the great exception. He is the one that can build. He is the one who is strong, and we trust Him as our motivation. We trust Him as the power behind it. We trust Him to get the job done. He is worthy. Let's seek Him. Let's admit that we need His help. We need the Lord. Would you lift that prayer with me this morning? We need the Lord. Or maybe you're listening at night. We need the Lord. Whatever time of day you are listening, we need the Lord. May this be our great prayer. Lord, we need You. God bless you, my dear friend. Thank you for listening. I pray that you'll join us again on another broadcast for the glory of God. Until then, God bless you and have a great day.